Okay, can you guys all hear me okay? Yes, okay, great. So hi, I am Lex and I'm the current president of the Information Science Student Association. And I want to welcome you all, especially our presenter, Professor Anne Germaine, to this panel, Intro to Your 678 Internship. Before we move on, I'm just going to make a quick little announcement about what ISSA is and about some of what we have coming up. ISSA is the Information Science Student Association. We are a registered graduate student organization. That means that we get a budget from everybody's student activity fee. And in order to have that budget and receive it, we need to have a government to provide oversight for that budget. And we need a government for next year. So right now there is an interest form. If you go to my involvement, you can find the interest form, but we need people to sign up to be the president and the treasurer. Those are the minimum necessary roles. Actually, we need president, treasurer, secretary, and vice president roles for next year's student government. So please consider signing up. Tell your friends. ISSA is for all master's students at UAlbany and PhD students at UAlbany. We are currently a merged student organization, and you can spend that money on pizza, which is what we have mostly spent it on this year to have student events to get everybody back together. You can also spend on trips, or you can spend it on conference printing, or deciding to send one of your members to a conference if your club is not so active. That can be how you spend your $1,000 as long as we have a government. So it's really important for people to sign up. Thank you to everybody here who is a member of ISSA currently. So I'm just going to pass it over now to Anne, is going to talk about the requirements of the 678. Our guests presenting today are Jery Huntley from our Storybridge, which is an internship site, and Shawna Reilly from historic Cherry Hill, which is another location that hosts interns. We'll hear from them all until about 10:40. Put questions in the chat, and then I'll bring the questions to everybody else at the end after the presentations, although Anne can go with Q&A a little bit about mechanics, but try to hold all your questions for after Jery and Shawna are done. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I want to follow up on the ISSA. One of the things that I think is really important with that is, especially if you're thinking about going into a public library or a library that requires civil service. One of the things with the civil service exam, it's really more of an application, and your master's is part of it. But if you have a leadership role, it actually scores higher. And so you probably have a greater chance of the job if you have done something with ISSA and taken a leadership role in that. So keep that in mind. Yeah. So I have participated in information science, library science at the university for a very long time. I have my undergraduate degree in information science and policy. I did a combined BA master's, so I have my master's in library science. I ended up doing an internship as an undergraduate, interestingly enough, in the university libraries at the university. I got a GA position after that, and then they asked me to work there. It was a temporary job, and then a permanent job came up. I applied for it, and I was in the university libraries for 24 years. Part of working at the university is you can take a course a semester with your UUP or union, and I ended up getting my PhD, and so I came over to CEHC in 2020 as a faculty member. So I'll give you a little history, but I think in that history, part of it is that internship was extremely important. And so one of the things with internships is that you're going to find that you learn a lot, you have hands-on with what you're doing, you're in with people who are in the field, and so you can really learn from them. You know, it is an internship. You should be learning. You should, if you're finding that they're, I'm going to be honest, if they're giving you busy work, you know, just photocopying, that is not an internship. And you can speak up. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up, you can go to your whoever's supervising your internship and say, I need a little a more rigorous experience here, we can certainly reach out to the site and ask for more of that. I usually suggest, Beth is one of my advisees, so she can tell you that this is true. With my advisees, I usually tell them at the very beginning of advisement, one of the first questions I ask is, where are you thinking about doing your internship? It should be where your dream job is, because you may get it as a dream job, but you may not, but at least you get that experience. And doing that early can be very valuable because in many of our courses, some of the requirements are to do informational interviews with people who are in the field. And if you talk to them when you're taking, some of those courses, the, information environment, the reference services courses, the library administration, you will get to meet them during that interview and you can decide, wow, do I still want to be here? You can also bring your resume and say, have you ever thought about having an intern? Those kind of interviews can often open the door for you to get an internship. So our internships, normally the 3-credit internship is 150 hours. I am very flexible with most of my students as far as taking the internship. I understand that most people have additional jobs. They may have family responsibilities. They may be caregivers. So they may not be able to do the traditional internship where you're doing 20 hours a week. I have students who sometimes, especially in the summer, they may start a little early in May to start doing their hours. And then if they have to go over the summer, going into the fall in order to complete those. When I do something like this, I usually give you what's called an I, an incomplete. Once you finish the hours and the required assignments, I change that I to an S. If you've satisfied that I never shows up after that. So don't be shy about getting an I. I's are there as a temporary marker. Once the real grade goes in, that I never is on your transcript. So nobody would know that you had gotten an incomplete about it with it. I'd rather you have a better experience than a negative experience. I usually suggest to people that you think a little outside the box. If you're going to a location and you really, you're going to a public library and you really want to work with children, that you ask to have an internship in the children's, department, that you think about a project that may be helpful, whether it's working with the children's summer program, or maybe being somebody who's doing outreach to local schools during the fall and the spring. But think about a project. If you have an idea when you go to a site, that can be very, very helpful. Many sites will have projects. I'm sure, Jery, you do, and Shawna, you do at the historic Jery Hill. So, you may have projects that you want them to do, and so you may lead with that. It's also, it's a good idea to have some thoughts and some ideas, because I think it's a share, especially because most of our students should be leaving this program with some new ideas that, anybody in the field is going to learn from those as well. Okay. I'll get into a little about the deliverables. Depending on who your supervisor is, there may be a little flex in this, as any other course you're taking. But the deliverables, I always say I want a log. What I suggest with the log is that you say, these are the days, I do it in a spreadsheet. These are the days I've worked. These are how many hours. And this is a description in the last column of what I've done. Sometimes in that description, you may write, I learned in 601 about policy, and I'm reading about policy at this site, or helping them develop some policy. So that was really helpful. I'm going to this site. I didn't get as much about policy in my courses, but having this and creating this, I've learned this, and this. That can be very helpful, that column, when you go to write your 5-page paper, okay? So you kind of documented the whole experience. You have to write about that experience in the 5-page paper. You basically have it outlined in that log, okay? So that's my recommendation. There's a lot of flex with the log, but I think that certainly helps. You have to have what we call a 1-paragraph statement about your internship. What I suggest to my students is that it's either a paragraph or 2 paragraphs. Make it a press release of your internship. This would be what your site would like to put in their newsletter about your internship, and what we would love to highlight about your internship. And so, and I have absolutely no problem with you co-writing that with whoever your mentor is at the site, okay? Because that's a win-win for all of us. And then the 5-page paper. And so that usually what I suggest is, if you've done a project, you know, that you highlight that project in that, what you learn from that, what you still need to learn from that. You know, an internship, you know, if you're still, if you start an internship at 18 credits, there may be additional things you need to, obviously, after you come back from your internship, what you would like to learn. Our traditional internship is 3 credits, 150 hours, but you can do more than 1 internship. I had somebody a number of years ago in her internship. It was very interesting. It was in a public library. Somebody had donated a collection of mental health resources, books mainly, and they had it cataloged, classified in their own classification system, not Library of Congress, not Dewey. It was some personally created system. And so because it had been a lot of books, the library just put them in a section and left them there. She took that collection out. She classified them in Dewey. She went through them, which ones, because some of them were older, she decided which ones were going to be weeded, and she made a list of new additions to that collection. She spent a whole summer doing it. It was a phenomenal project. She took the next semester and did a project on marketing that collection to she was in Westchester County. So her efforts were on marketing that collection to her local constituents, but also the greater Westchester area. And so she did a number of things. So there were 2 internships involved in that. And that was really nice because she had been invested in the collection. And so this let her really enhance her experience. So, you know, think about that. I'm not saying everybody has to do that. I'm not saying everybody would have that project, but think about that. As somebody who oversees internships, I have a lot of flexibility with my students. Some students want to see me once a week. Some people want to see me every other week. Some people want to see me once a month. I am more than happy to go in person, but most people, we have Zoom meetings. I like about halfway through, it's not a requirement, that we have a meeting with whoever is the site mentor, myself, and the student, so that we can say really nice things about the student so they can hear them, because you're doing really, really good work. And I want them to have a good experience. As I say, some people meet with me once a week. This woman who did the project with the reclassification, she really needed some assistance. We met once a week for an hour every week, talking about what she was doing. You know, she just, you know, it was a really big project. And so that's, you know, and we did. I'm fine with that. Some people just, as I say, stop in every 2 weeks and say, this is how many hours I've done. You know, I'm on board. Everything is okay.
Carolyn, can I just in for 1 second? So it's 10:15. Just so everybody knows, I'm trying to sit like a statue to make that camera not keep coming over to me. But I'm gonna move the camera, that's the seat that's in between Carolyn and the camera, in the hopes that helps. And Aaron is here.
Aaron is here.
Hope I don't mess up the camera.
No.
I know it. Yes, it is weird. I apologize if it does.
I'm just gonna sit over here. Hopefully it doesn't like me as much as it likes Caroline.
I think I have to move around. Oh my gosh, Erin, we have a whole bunch of coffee here.
Yeah.
I didn't even see this, thank you. So those are the big, sorry, Erin, you missed a whole bunch. I'd like to throw it out to some of the people at the site so they can,
Yeah, so actually, before we hear the presentation from Jery, since we have a past intern at Cherry Hill, can we hear from Cherry Hill first? And because there's an alum who's here, that they can go first, and then Lindsay can get on with her day. So Lindsay and Shawna.
Hello, welcome, or greetings from Eastern Massachusetts. It's where I am now.
Yeah, it's so nice to see Lindsay. I haven't seen her in a while, so thank you for the opportunity to see her on Zoom. Lindsay, do you want to talk first about how you came to Cherry Hill, and then I can kind of talk more about what we do, or
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can start. So
your
I,
experience as a student?
yeah, so I started grad school in 2019, and was the information science student, obviously, on the archives track. And my internship at Cherry Hill started in the summer of 2020. Little context there. It was, yes, it was a very strange time. Well, I was hired on in a team. I was the grad student. I worked in conjunction with two other undergraduate students working to transcribe and scan and upload and create metadata for letters pertaining to the African-American experience at Cherry Hill, enslaved individuals and individuals working in the house. And we uploaded everything to New York Heritage, which I know Cherry Hill hadn't been on before. So it was really nice to establish Cherry Hill on that website. And we also worked to photograph and establish metadata for objects as well, rare books. I worked a lot with sheet music, musical instruments. We had dolls. We had all kinds of things in the house. I'm just trying to, please jump in if I'm forgetting something. My internship was extended through, I want to say it was extended through a little bit into the fall, maybe October, maybe like the end of October, early November. I
think you were paid through us,
yes,
in the summer through the National Endowment of the Humanities grant.
Yeah.
And then in the fall, you did it as an intern for credit, right?
Yes, that's
because we had more than we knew and we needed Lindsay to stay. She graciously did.
Yeah, happy to stay. Yeah, it was the NEH grant. Was it $30,000 you guys received? I want to say it was.
I don't remember, but
I don't remember either. It was quite a bit.
Basically allowed us all. Yeah.
It was a wonderful experience. I was very fortunate to work for Cherry Hill, especially in a time where things were just so up in the air still, in the summer of 2020. And I was actually able to, my internship was in person. Like, that was so valuable to me. I'm a hands-on learner, and I needed that hands-on experience. Not that I would have been fine, I suppose, working from home and creating metadata and transcribing whatever I need to do from home, to actually be able to go in and see these documents and look at photographs and just be there in person was just so valuable. So it was a great experience.
Yeah, and for us it was, I'll say, reflect on Lindsay's involvement, but then I'll say more about Cherry Hill's projects. For us, it was great because, Lindsay came in and she had expertise that we didn't have because we have such a small staff. We have a director who's also the curator, and then myself, who's the education person. Both of us have public history degrees. We don't have information science backgrounds. So when the interns were learning how to use content DM and how to write metadata, we were learning at the same exact time. So,
Yes.
and then there would be things where we would say, Lindsay, what do you think? Because we knew that she was taking classes. So that's something where you can bring real value to institutions because we don't have that background sometimes. And then fortunately for me, Lindsay stayed as a volunteer afterwards. So she volunteered as a guide. She gave special tours during our Murder at Cherry Hill tours, which meant she had to learn even another tour. And then she helped us with our institutional archives. So we, you know, lots of institutions have other projects that are like, we just like, we don't have time for this. And again, we don't necessarily have the archival expertise that you can bring to an organization. And so you know, Lindsay also was responsible for helping us organize our institutional archives, which have all of her lovely notes on them. And so it, you know, that's been really valuable. I'll say that oh, Lindsay, would you say how like having the internship helped with employment? That might be useful.
Yeah, I think, so I will tell you that I am working in the public library field now. So I am not working for an archive. That's just, you know, figure I'd just be honest. But I feel like that when I was applying for archival jobs, and I did have several interviews. I had an interview at the Massachusetts Historical Society. I had an interview with the trustees, which oversees some historic sites in Massachusetts. And everyone was very impressed by the kind of work that I did at Cherry Hill in terms of digitizing and establishing metadata for items, and the volume that we were able to do in those few short months. It seems like it definitely had an impact. I mean, ultimately, again, I'm not in the archival field, and I'm not working in a historic house museum, but I feel like it definitely was impressive to potential employers.
So I'll add that I went back to school at UAlbany for public history in 2012. I had a degree in teaching social studies that I got about 10 years earlier. And my career in this field started with an internship. So I can't emphasize enough how important internships have been for me, because I, for a class, needed to interview someone. And so I interviewed the previous director of education at Cherry Hill. And after my interview with her, so I could write my paper, she offered me an internship. And so I had an internship with her in the spring semester. And then I needed to interview someone else at another museum. And so I interviewed them for another class and another paper. And they offered me an internship that summer, which is what I needed for the requirement, because public history has to do an internship too. And then the person at Cherry Hill, when she was applying for a grant to create a new position, she asked me if I wanted the job. I mean, I didn't even have to interview for it. Of course, they didn't get the grant. But then when she was applying for another grant, she wrote me into the grant. And so then I was a consultant with them. The other museum that I interned with in the summertime offered me a consulting job with them as well. So I was consulting at 2 different museums, spurred by the internships. And then at the end of my consultancy at Cherry Hill, my predecessor retired. And so I was absolutely in the right place at the right time. And I was offered much fewer hours than she had had. But over the course of 7 years, I am now the director of education. And a lot of that had to do with what Cherry Hill could fund at the time. But I can't say enough now when I am in a position of hiring interns, and then as we get more funding and we can offer jobs to people, our current education assistant and our current teaching assistant, which are the 2 jobs we filled, actually, and our curatorial and facilities assistant, all 3 of those people started as interns at Cherry Hill. So the idea is, like, if you are a reliable person, if you are a good person to work with, if you do good work, and then you're someone that we can trust, because institutions, we don't have a lot of time or leisure to interview a ton of people and to, you know, make sure and then train people. If someone comes into an institution, they already know how you work, it's a really great fit usually. So I can't emphasize how much internships are really great for institutions, but also they were for me as a student. And I'll just add one more thing, and that the other nice thing about interning is that it used to be when I was a student, we had an intern come in, or a former intern come in and talk to our, like public history management class. And he said that his internship was literally moving furniture at People's Island, not to call out People's Island, because I don't think they do that anymore. But literally they hired him because he could carry furniture. And so that was his whole summer, was just moving furniture from place to place. Of course, that was like 20 years ago. But internships have changed a lot. So obviously ask questions, but we are looking for people to do skilled work. And so that's another value for an internship, is that you're not going to it's not like you're like the coffee person or something. You really are doing work that we want to do and that we need to do. And especially in the case of Lindsay, this was like a huge project for us. And we built in interns so that they could be bringing their, what they have been learning in school to us. And also we could, do a beneficial thing, because saying that, hey, we're going to be giving opportunities for employment, even if it's short-term intern employment, to students, this looks good to granting agencies. They like to know that we are going to be supporting the next generation of museum and archives workers. So what I've been told is that they favor grants that employ interns. So I can't emphasize enough how wonderful of an experience it is for us.
Sure, and I just like to jump in too and say, as you're talking, Shawna, I was thinking, if you have questions on anything, or if there's something that specifically you want to learn, definitely bring that up for your internship, just because it is your internship. I had to keep reminding myself of that as well. I mean, yes, you are helping out, especially if it's a grant funded project, but if there's something of interest to you, or if you have questions, don't feel afraid to speak up and ask those questions.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Shawna and Lindsay. I just want to jump in to say, Shawna, please make sure you tell everybody the basics of what and where is Cherry Hill, so that people leave with that understanding that. And Jery, is it okay with you if we check if there's any questions from students for Lindsay while Lindsay's here? Okay, so yeah, so Shawna, if you could just tell any of the basic questions, and then we'll take questions for you too from students.
Sure. So Historic Cherry Hill is a historic house museum. It's in Albany's South End, the southern tip of the South End. It was built in 1787 and lived in continuously by 5 generational households until 1963. It's all Philip Van Rensselaer and Maria Van Rensselaer were the first owners of the house, and then the last owner was their great-great-granddaughter. When she died in 1963, the house became a museum. We're a private nonprofit. And so we have all of their stuff. They were, I say very affectionately, they were hoarders. So we have 70,000 things in our collection. And it's really, 30,000 of those are manuscripts and letters and other documents. And it's a treasure trove, because what's going on at, when Lincoln is assassinated, and then you can go and you can look in the letters at that date and you can see what they were writing to each other, because they wrote to each other like every day, and they kept everything. We have receipts, we have like tins, that had like baking soda in them from 100 years ago. We've got toothbrushes, we have underwear, we have like everything that you could imagine. So our big challenge is like how to find that stuff, right? Like it's hiding somewhere. But that's Cherry Hill in a nutshell.
So any questions from Beth or Elena or Sarisha right now, or should we move on to Jery?
How much of that material are you still working on processing and cataloging?
So we have a filing cabinet of the original objects that were accession. It goes over 20,000. I would say the bulk of the collection, I can't tell you numbers, the bulk of it is all accession. but there are, like, I would say, a wall of boxes of unaccessioned items. So one of the things that Lindsay did was, when we knew we were going to be working on James Knapp, who was one of the subjects of the project she worked on, it was a box that said unaccessioned Knapp books. So we pulled that out. So there's still a good percentage of things that are not accessioned, or, a good number of things. And then there are a lot of things where, sure, a lot of people can relate to this. You go into Past Perfect and you look up an accession number and it says book, or it says cloth, or it says anything that gives you no information about the item at all. So then you have to go and look it up anyway and try and figure out what it is. So we're like, because we opened in 1964, we have like just different layers of what was technologically available. And so a volunteer who's working in the 1970s can't just like Google something and find out, what year it was made. So there's always more information to find out about stuff, for better or worse.
Any other questions, Elena or Surisha? So thank you so much, Lindsay, for joining us, and thank you, Shawna. Shawna, I hope you will stay till the end for the more Q&A after Jery, if you can. Lindsay, as you mentioned, we're so happy to see one of our alums here, and you should tell everybody that they should run for president or treasurer. We need a government for next year for this club, so.
You should run.
Yes, thank you. And now we're going to hear from Jery.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me.
Good
Thank
to see you, Lindsay.
Bye.
And I'm gonna share my screen and use a PowerPoint, but I promise you it's not boring and it doesn't have a lot of words on it. So just let me know, someone give me the thumbs up if they're seeing my screen. Okay. So this is a little bit different internship. And I've conducted it, I've been the mentor 4 times. And my library students have really liked it. So let me tell you a little bit about it and start with a little bit about me. I did get my BA in education and my MLS from the University at Albany. And I was a public and a school librarian for a while. But my career took a different turn. I ended up going into what might be called my family business. I was in politics. I was now Senator Schumer's first staff in the Assembly and in Congress, and have been in DC over 40 years with a career in associations, issues management, worked on environmental lobbying. And so you wonder, why am I doing an internship for library school students? I'll tell you about it now. So I live in DC, and I also live half the year in the Adirondacks in Keene Valley. And when I first retired, I now work about 60 hours a week as a volunteer on this project. When I first retired, I did what was natural. I went down to the library to say, how could I volunteer for you? How can I help you? I ended up raising funds for them, grant funds for their capital campaign to improve their 1896 building. And then I helped with other grants. And next thing you know, I had an idea. That little idea I had a few years ago became what is now a national nonprofit called our Story Bridge. What we did in Keene Valley was we realized that, especially in the Adirondacks, people don't even know we're 6.1 million acres. We are so much a part of New York, and we are mostly wilderness. It feels like everything that happened in American history passed through the Adirondacks. Population skews old. The media, the records are in, photos, first editions written by and about the area, hours of oral histories. They sit in the wonderful archives, but they're not really used, and people don't know how amazing culturally The Adirondacks are, especially the town of Keene, where I have my little home in the woods. I also started volunteering in the school, and I learned that we send almost all our kids to college. If they make it, they don't come back, just like other rural areas. And if they, don't make it and they come back to town with a challenging climate, with a very challenging economic situation, that they can possibly succumb to the problems again of rural America, substance abuse. They don't know what great history has happened in the area, how the culture of volunteering is so strong, how we help each other, and that there are jobs they can have. This is what became the answer. Project called Adirondack Community. We take 5-minute audio oral histories, just 5 minutes, the attention span of young and old today. We record them on a platform that allows us to upload photos, a lot of them from our archives, but some from the storytellers. We get some HTML code from it. We pop it on a website, sometimes that same day, and their story looks like a little video on a website, just by talking to us for 5 minutes. What happened was that after we started doing this in the town of Keene Valley, 1,100 people, we have over 280 stories. That website has been looked at and those stories listened to by almost 8,000 unique users in a population of 1,100. They tell the story of a really interesting community in the Adirondacks. And so I thought, if we could do it, other people could do it. Got some small grants, still sponsored by the library, wrote a book on how to do it, made small videos, did a bunch of social media and other marketing. And what we now have is a project where our story-rich projects on the model of what we did in the Adirondacks are all over the US. Oops, it went ahead once. So our mission is to be a resource and a toolkit to preserve and circulate local audio stories, past and present, through accessible online media. Go to a website, listen to a story. To deploy them across the country to diverse people, stories from diverse people, and to help these communities strengthen themselves by sharing their stories with the focus on preserving the stories of older generations before they're lost and encouraging younger generations to become engaged in their communities. Just like we started in Keene, these stories are used in school. You say you're going to, social studies teacher says, I'm going to start a unit on World War II, and the kids their eyes start closing or rolling. But you play a 5-minute story from someone they recognize from their neighborhood about what it was really like to be in the infantry in World War II, and they get interested. We try to empower every community to cultivate connection across the generations, encourage civic engagement, celebrate diversity, and gender shared and durable kindness. And starting from this little project in Keene Valley at our small association library, we now have 16 active projects in New York, in the country, in 10 states. 6 are in upstate New York, and as was announced on Wednesday at the Museum Association of New York's annual meeting, we will be part of an NEH grant they were awarded to start our Storybridge projects in 12 museums in New York State for the semi-quincentennial. And we picked up a few more projects, so we've doubled. Just to get a feel for what a story is like, I'm going to play a few minutes of a story. So you see a story on a website, and you click and you play it. And I'm not going to go through all of the story because I hope you'll be interested in it. It's really timely. But here's just a little excerpt from another one.
I was 13 years old.
Does anybody have tech support for Jery about why we can't hear?
Yeah, you know, when I did share screen, for some reason, it didn't give me that option. Let me do it again.
You have to
To do the sound.
Use original,
so-
audio, whatever that means, wherever you find that.
You know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what you were listening to and just make it a little bit easier. So I'm, you know, just to go through the time. So Ron Kirsop is head of the OWL Library Coalition or group of libraries around south of Rochester. And he told a story about book banning. And the second story was by Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine, the guitarist, who is a biracial man, walked out of his house one day, going to school, and there was a noose hanging in the doorway, and how he became an activist as a result. Let me just make sure that you're sharing the screen okay. Hang on a second. And then, you know, a third one I thought would be interesting was, and this one is from the West Coast, a project in Oregon from a Shoshone, talking about his heritage and the fact that the heritage of Indigenous communities are not necessarily recorded as Indigenous children learned from their grandparents. So the stories are, you know, regular, hi, I helped in Tropical Storm Irene, or this is how my family got here, to very impactful social justice stories, and they just run the gamut. So how does this relate to this internship? Well, my premise is you learn great stuff in library school like I did, things I use in my career, even though it went in different directions. But that there are things you don't learn, and you can learn them through this internship and apply them to work on our story bridge, learning about our story bridge and how it's more, at the current time, more libraries that have started our story bridge projects. Explore different opportunities to apply things we do in our story bridge, the research we do, other things I'll talk about in a minute, to what you're learning in the academic environment, to develop skills to start a career or build proficiencies in a current career and expand the network. So we have a teacher's guide online. We take every story. I have teachers and students who characterize them by courses they could be used in. And they can just go online and say, I teach geography, I teach earth science, I teach American history, and they can click and go right to a story that they can use in their class. And there are about 600 stories now. This was put together also by my interns, who do their 2-sentence summaries of each story as they listen and attach the link. They write press releases. I teach them how to do podcasts. They do social marketing, grant writing. They learn how to network. They talk about their careers. And as I go to conferences, I go to a lot of librarian conferences now, and museum conferences and nonprofits. I see all these presentations that are all on these things I'm writing in the webinar, but not traditional librarian skills. I also have a slightly different approach. Yes, we get a lot of work in our story bridge out of our internships. but I look at it more like the teacher in me. And I write a curriculum that has a learning focus for each week, specific work that gets done. And then the next week, we review the work, and then we do a lesson on other things and assign work that relates to it and other work we need to have done. And then I adapt the internship to the interests of the interns. For me, and that doesn't matter for the internship, this has been a really great experience. Teaching, learning about the world of librarianship now, taking the decades of my career in Washington, in Albany, as a librarian, in other fields, of having lots of people work for me doing marketing and other kinds of programs that I've learned from. And then I can transfer these skills to my interns in the context of our story bridge. In fact, my first intern, and you know, I heard right here that having interns in grants is really powerful for a review of a grant. I'm very heavy in some opportunities we have at IMLS, NEH, and specific humanities councils. And our interns are involved in those projects. But my first intern is now a contractor to us on these grants and doing a lot of our story bridge work. And so I could talk about this forever, and I do. But I love kind of coming full circle to my roots and having University of Albany interns. I do one in the summer and fall and spring semesters. The summer internship is now available. And I'd love to hear from any interns who might be interested, sending a cover letter and a resume to create your story project at Gmail. You can also learn about our story bridge at our storybridge.org. And with that, I will take any questions.
Jery, I think I want to be your intern.
Just find me some more good interns. Sometimes I feel like I give more than I take, but it's such a joyous mutual experience, at least from my perception. But I clearly hear that from the interns too.
Yeah, we really appreciate everyone who is a mentor on site. I can't emphasize enough how helpful it is.
So Beth and Elena and Sarisha, do any of you have any specific questions for Jery? We'll have a minute for that, and then we'll open it up for just general questions and dialogue with Carolyn. And Aaron Kucher is now here also to answer questions about the Director of Experiential Education. CEHC.
Well, Jery, you mentioned like one of the goals of that project was to have the different generations starting to interact. Have you seen that happen in the communities where you've been doing this project?
So yes, in fact, I mean, I've heard about it. I've seen it firsthand. We do a lot of our pilot things in New York, in King Valley. And so one of the things we do are 8th grade story project and 12th grade story project. Each 8th grader tells a 1 to 3 minute story, and each 12th grader does a regular 3 to 5 minute story. And we either combine them in podcasts and post them, or we do the individual stories. And as you know, the last couple of years of doing this have gone on, we found that more of the stories from the kids are stories about their grandparents or older neighbors or intergenerational, which has felt really, really good. And the stories connect. For example, we have a story about a Hispanic family who's moved to our community and had all kinds of problems about being abused on a job and with their housing, and how the community got together and helped build a Habitat for Humanity house for them. And they live in it and they thank the community. And, it's a scary story with a beautiful ending. But the now 9th grader of that family told a story about when his grandparents came to visit their home for the first time.
I know, yeah.
It is, both stories are tear jerkers. And so that gets us into that intergenerational support. I see a comment. Yes, Cherry Hill. I'm happy to talk to you. So email me, create your story project at Gmail, and we'll schedule a Zoom. And as soon as I saw you were the other speaker, I thought, whoa, we got to do this for Cherry Hill.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be really great. We had tried to do a grant during 2020 that would be an oral history project, and it was like, how do we facilitate this? How do we, especially working with vulnerable populations, like how do we go in and interview people? So this is so cool. I love this.
So you got right away that this is different from all the oral histories that sit on shelves gathering dust in our archives. It's 5 minutes, it's live. And I love the thought of you doing, I've spent a good part of my life in Albany. So if we do it, we will in fact plan this in person and on Zoom.
Excellent. Thank you.
I will let you two meet up elsewhere to plan the Cherry Hill our Storybridge collab. I'm gonna ask some questions of Carol Ann and or Aaron and see if any other students have other questions. So Carol Ann, the first question is, you talked about making a press release, and I just want to confirm if that was the closing report or if that was something at the beginning.
So you would have a press release, it would be at the end.
Okay, good.
So the idea is if you were going, and I don't say it has to be a press release, but think of it as a press release of like, you would want this published. We do have students who just give us a paragraph of, I did this, this, and this. It's not as rich as if you put it out as if you were going to put it in a newsletter at a site, or if we were going to put it in CEHC. So I think that for us is really, really helpful.
And think about describing your past work for a public audience.
Right. Yeah. The project that you did.
And the other question I had is, does your advisor need to be your 678 advisor?
No. No, this summer I'm advising a number of students whose their advisors are not here. So yeah, no problem.
And that's also something where if there's a question of if your advisor is going to fill that role or not, you can just reach out to me and we can absolutely discuss that, and I can maybe explain that a little further.
Okay. Any other questions, or Aaron, do you want to add anything?
So yeah, I apologize. So I didn't catch what Carol Ann had talked about, although she always has really great information. So I'm confident that it was awesome. But one thing that I think is really beneficial, and I think a lot of us tend to lose sight of this, is I know we get a lot of email, but we send everything out through email. So for the students, always be on the lookout for any opportunities. We share a lot, and sometimes I know that's information overload, but keep an eye on those opportunities, because there are a lot of great ones that we send typically to our full student listserv, but there are some that go specifically just to our MSIS students, to our graduate level students and our 4+1s. But look through those. Try and stay up to date on those, even if maybe you aren't looking at an internship just yet. The reason why I say that is, if you look through what opportunities there are right now, that may help you with ideas for when you are ready to pursue an internship. It may help you even drive like conversations that you have with your advisor of, oh, I saw this opportunity. I know I'm not ready for an internship just yet, but I thought it was really cool and it sounded interesting. what direction maybe can I go with that? Or do you have any thoughts or feedback on that with respect to the classes I've already taken or the classes I need to take in the future? So again, even if you aren't looking at it for an internship just yet, definitely check out those emails that we send out and see what is out there right now to familiarize yourself. And then when you are ready for an internship, then you can even say like, oh, I know where to go. I know what to do. I know some cool ones that I've already seen that piqued my interest.
Just to add to that, I've obviously advertised for internships when I have specific funding for them. And I email them because we don't know how else to reach you. So we're emailing them to your departments. But I've also taken interns who know that we've had internships in the past. So I have a current undergraduate student who just emailed me. He was like, do you have anything that I can do? I couldn't pay him because I didn't have a grant specifically earmarked, but that, like your advisor said, if you know of places that offer internships, then even if they're not advertising one right now, you know of places that can serve you.
Okay, any other questions from Beth or Shrisha or Elena?
I have kind of a general question, but as people that coordinate interns, I thought you might have some good insight. How would you advise for someone who is navigating the sort of different offers timeline of internships, who, because of committing to another internship, has to deny an internship that they've been offered that is really of interest? I guess, my plan is just to politely say thank you, but keep me in mind when I'm on the job market in the future. But yeah, if you sort of have advice on how to navigate the different offers timeline of internships.
Elaine, is that a question for Carolyn and Aaron or for Shawna and Jery?
I guess for whoever would like to answer it, but Shawna and Jery, since you coordinate interns, you might have some insight.
This is Jery. I look at it from the other side and then I'll answer you directly. I try to get a bunch of resumes and then I pick and I schedule Zooms so that the intern really understands what the internship is about, what it's like communicating with me. I ask them some specific questions on things I've noticed in their resume. I give them a taste of the program. But that's where we get to the problem you're bringing up. They're looking at a few internships. I might know who I'd really like to have, and I encourage them. But it's up to the intern to sort through the possibilities on a time frame that's problematic, because I can't put a deadline on their answering, and they might pick something else. So what I'm saying more supports the fact that it's a dilemma and just asks other input on what guidance can we give our potential interns when they may have deadlines or they don't know which one to choose.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for us, we have limited positions for paid internships. So, and those are always time sensitive because they're based on grants and we have grant deadlines. So if someone contacts me and says, I'm interested in an internship, but I can't do this one because of time constraints, or, somebody interviews and then says that they can't do it, I'll remember them in the future, but we're such that our grants come when they come. We're not like, oh, well, and then next year we're going to have this grant. We never know when we're going to have the funding to do something. I usually have like one intern that is just working with us for experience and it's not paid. And then it's much more flexible and can be based on your schedule. But then obviously you have the downside of it not being paid. So I think, you have to kind of, no one will be mad if you choose another opportunity because we know what position you're in. And certainly I had someone who applied for an internship in 2020 and then asked, was interested in being a volunteer in 2022. I remembered her because I already had her resume. So, just sending a nice letter, letting people know. I think you can do a lot with just pleasantries and, as Jery said, it's just one of those, it's a challenge.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it's 11 o'clock, so I don't know how everybody else is feeling, but I propose that we end early unless there's more questions. But I want to invite Jery, unless you Albany wants to beat me to it, ISSA wants to invite Jery and one of her past interns to come give a talk at ISSA 1 week in the fall, if you can. But if this school wants to beat me to the punch, they can do it too, because they have a budget for food.
Oh, we don't want to, yeah, yes.
It's great, right?
The last week of September.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, so we'll send.
Yeah, we'd love to. I think Kelly Bartlett would come with me, or there are a few others who might.
Well, let's do it in collaboration,
Mhm.
so that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna end this recording and you guys, everybody can hang out, but any last, Sarisha, Beth, this is your last chance for recording for a question on the recording, and if not, I'm gonna press stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.